Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Data and AI Summit. My name is John Levine. I am a product manager here at Databricks. And yeah, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for coming to the summit. Thank you for coming to this talk. I know there's lots of conferences. There's lots of talks. Appreciate you being at this one. So the title of today's talk is A Practitioner's Guide to Serverless Compute. So hopefully everyone heard in this morning's keynote, our CEO, Ali, talked about how we're 100% serverless now. Everything is going to be serverless, which we're super excited about. In this talk, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty details of what does that actually mean? Can I use serverless? How do I use serverless? How does all this stuff work? So I want this to be interactive. Please put up your hand, ask questions. If I can see you, I'll try to point you out and repeat your question for everyone. And if not, we'll have time at the end to ask questions. But to get started, I want to do a little bit of a survey, a quick poll to get to know folks in the room. How many people here use Spark? That's what I thought. Basically everyone. Okay, awesome. How many people here use Databricks? Okay, basically everyone. Okay, great. How many people within Databricks have actually launched a cluster before, created new compute before? Oh, okay, awesome. Okay, this talk is for you. You're in the right place. How many people here have used serverless compute on Databricks? DB SQL, okay, so a little bit less. Okay, perfect. So for the folks of you who've used classic compute, which is everybody, how many of you have spent time like tuning your clusters, like picking the right instance types or like how much RAM and like driver, things like that, yeah. How many folks have gotten paged because your cluster died or it never started? You couldn't get instances, yeah. I put an hour, but how many people have spent, a week or a month on a DBR version upgrade, a Spark upgrade? Yeah, I thought so. Or maybe you were starting up a cluster, you're waiting for it to start and you went off and you started doing something else, and then you came back to your computer and like, you forgot what you were doing, maybe it shut down already. I think a lot of us have had that experience, yeah. So this is what we're trying to fix with serverless compute. This is what we're trying to address. So, I think most people know this already, but before I go any further, what actually is serverless compute? Okay, so, I didn't come up with this, but serverless compute, of course, there are servers. What are we talking about, though? The really short version, let's talk about classic compute for a second. So classic compute is just like what was before serverless compute. The classic compute model is that, so everyone uses Databricks. When you sign into Databricks, the web application, the control plane, of course, lives in your Databricks account. But Databricks launches Spark clusters on your behalf in your cloud account, your AWS, your Azure, your GCP account. We help you operate those Spark clusters. And so you pay for the compute both to your cloud and to Databricks. So the simplest way to explain serverless compute is that that compute now runs in your Databricks account. So cloud bill goes to zero, and you pay Databricks for the whole thing. Classic compute, I want to say, we're going to come back to this again and again. Classic compute is really great. There's a lot of great benefits to classic compute, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I think it's safe to say none of us would be here today if it was not for classic compute. So we love classic compute, but there's some things about it that are really hard to fix. And serverless is going to help us make it much simpler, much faster, much easier to operate. One other thing I want to clarify, everyone saw this slide this morning. It was so, when I saw Ali give this slide, I was like, yeah, that's awesome. I want this in my talk. We're 100% serverless now. Yes. Serverless is really like, well, I guess technically it's an adjective, but I think about like an adverb. You do something serverlessly. Right? It's a way that you operate something. And so we have all these amazing products in the Data Intelligence Platform, and all of them are now serverless. We've had, some of them like model serving have been serverless from day one. DB SQL has been serverless for over a year. You're probably familiar with those. And those products are great because they just work. They just run serverlessly. You don't ever have to think about it. Ali mentioned this in the keynote, though. Notebooks and workflows, PySpark, we took a little bit of a different approach to this. And so what we realized was that we could have done that. We could have had an experience where it's like lift and shift. And before the compute was in your cloud account, and now it's in your Databricks account. We could have done that. What we realized was that would not be the experience we want to create. We couldn't make something that's fast, that's simple, that's really amazing experience. We're trying to kind of fix the sins of the past. So that's what we're going to really focus on today. Notebooks and workflows running arbitrary PySpark in this serverless way, which is something that's really new. So I'm going to keep coming back to this. This is really something, serverless jobs and serverless workflows and serverless notebooks is brand new. It's a little bit of a cliche. Every product manager in the world thinks they are or wants to be Steve Jobs up on stage talking about the iPhone. We have this amazing revolutionary technology. When the iPhone came out in 2007, I like to remind folks, it had a 2G internet connection, had no app store. A lot of the things we take for granted were not there. And guess what? I'm still giving you this presentation on my laptop, on my MacBook. So the iPhone has not replaced the Mac. So you see where this is going. I'm going to keep coming back to this analogy. I think of serverless compute as like something like mobile. It's a new way of doing things. It's going to unlock a lot of new use cases. The first version that we have, it's amazing. It's what it's good at, it's amazing at, but it's not going to do everything on day one. In classic compute, you know, your desktops, your laptops, they're going to be with us for a little bit. All right. So done a lot of talking already, but this is the practitioner's guide. Let's get to the demo. So this is my, in case I'm not as brave as Casey was this morning, if my demo fails, I have this nice GIF animation to show you, but let's try to do it. I'm going to go full screen. I think, actually, let's just clear this. Let's just clear everything. So I have a very trivial notebook here. And it's attached to compute that is running, but actually I meant to reset this before the talk. Let's just kill that for a second. So here's my notebook. Let's say this notebook has already been attached to a classic compute cluster. So if I try to run it, the first thing that has to happen is I have to start and attach and run the cluster. And I think all of you already know this. This can be slow. So it depends on a lot of things, but this can take many minutes to get started. This is the first thing we're trying to fix with serverless compute for notebooks and for workflows. Now, while this is starting, let's actually talk about what's going on under the hood. Let's talk about what is in your classic cluster. So you heard Ali say in the keynote this morning, we're just making clusters go away. Well, there was a lot of stuff there. So I'm going to go and try to create new compute. And by the way, can everyone see this? Should I make it bigger? Let's make things bigger. Yeah. All right. There we go. I want to actually take you through this page. This is weird because this is a talk about serverless compute, but I'm going to talk a good amount about classic because I want to actually talk through what is all this stuff that's in classic compute. What do you actually need to do when you launch classic compute, and where is all this stuff going? So let's just start from the top. Policy. So what is policy? So policies are basically a way for admins to say, hey, I want users to use compute that has these properties, kind of like a template that's filled out and enforcing rules. And we'll talk more about this, but we have some that are built in here. I'm going to start with unrestricted. Access mode. This is a really hard one to explain. I'm not going to go too much into this, but I will say that all serverless compute is under the hood using the same architecture as our shared mode compute or UC shared mode compute. But just right off the bat, here's this choice you have to make when you launch compute. Is it single user? Is it shared mode? Is it no isolation shared? Like, probably many of you in the room understand what those things are, but it's something you have to understand to launch compute before you do anything else. Runtime versions. Yeah, so this is one of the biggest things that we're trying to fix about the past. I know many of you have been burned by painful upgrades. I'm really sorry about that. With serverless, you're going to do maybe one more upgrade and then never have to think about this again. But even right now, if you look at the versions we have, there are a lot of versions. There's the standard, there's ML runtime. There's a lot of things you have to pick here today. Photon, what is this? Photon off run. I know many of you know what Photon is. But this is another choice you have to make when setting up compute. Let's talk about worker types. So this is sort of what I think of as like the heart of cluster configuration, which is how many nodes do I have? What's the minimum, maximum number of nodes? What are the node types? Do I want something with more CPU or more RAM? How are you supposed to pick this? There's like so many choices here. If I pick something, I also get this nice, message. I should use the fleet instance types. Oh, okay, cool. Now, some folks here are probably experts in this. I'm sure many of you know way more about this than me and have opinions about the best instance types to use, or maybe you've spent time running workflows, again, using different clusters, different configurations, trying to optimize, get the best performance for the lowest cost. We've put that burden on you. And we hear from our customers is that they spend a huge amount of their time trying to optimize this stuff, trying to upgrade DBR versions and not spending time on the things that are valuable to them. again, what we're trying to fix with serverless. So yeah, I mentioned to pick the driver type, just like the worker type. Okay, auto scaling, there's like some choices about auto scaling. Okay, shutdown. Instance profiles, we'll talk more about this, but okay, this is how, this instance profiles are coupling this notion of data access to compute, right? You're setting up your cluster, but you have to think about, okay, well, I was picking the scaling parameters, and now I'm shifting gears and thinking about what data can this access. Tagging, of course, we'll talk more about tags. Of course, there's advanced options. I'm going to go through this quickly, but spot instances. A lot of people mention sometimes you want to use spot instances, they're not there. We're making you think about that. We're making you think about the economics of compute on Azure, AWS. Spark configurations. I heard someone tell me there's like 10,000 of these plus. I don't know if that's true. But I don't think anyone really knows how many Spark configurations there are. I know everyone has their favorite Spark configs. But this is something that you should not have to think about, right? If we are the data intelligence platform, we should be able to pick these for you and do this automatically for you. There's so much here. We could keep talking through all the details. I think just to come back to the deck for a second, the way I'd summarize this is that this is not really a democratic experience. If our mission is to democratize data and AI, there's so much that you have to know about before you've written a line of code just to launch compute, just to use the product. And then, in fact, when you do have your cluster, if you have to start it, it can take a long time. So a couple of customer quotes. Hire people to use Spark, not to run Spark. This is really the heart of it for me. We want to make the running Spark go away, the actual compute configuration go away, so you can focus on doing things that really add value. We talked about performance. Yeah. It just takes too long for clusters to start. In addition to this being really annoying, I have this story. I think making access to compute faster is going to change how people actually use Spark and use Databricks. So I have a great story. We had a customer, financial services company, and they have data that arrives at really irregular times. They don't know when it's going to arrive. And when it does arrive, they need to take action on it quickly. If it takes too long, maybe it's not valuable to act on. So they have two choices today in Classic. They could keep this big cluster up and running all the time, waiting for the data to come in and paying mostly for idle time. Or they could try to spin the cluster up, but again, it might take 10, 15 minutes for it to start. So I think that having faster access to compute is really going to change how people operate. So really excited about this. So of course, I've been telling you we're going to fix this with serverless. Let's actually take a look. So let's just go right back to that same notebook I was just in. Go to my recents, demo. Cool. Hey, this did run, by the way. Yes. All right. Good. It did start. Serverless compute. Okay, here's the moment. How long will this take? Serverless compute. I'm going to run the same query. And this is the scary part of the demo. Hope no one has a stopwatch out. Our goal here is that this should start in about 10 seconds or less. Oh no, it is taking more than that. Oh man. But the most important thing to point out here is there is no compute selection. Oh, there we go. All right, now we're running. Select star. Cool, so once this starts running, there we go. All right, woo, serverless compute. It works. So great. So there's no more compute configuration at all. Things just work. So where did everything go? So let's actually talk through some of those things I just mentioned. So the first thing is, what were some of the things I picked? DBR versions. There is no DBR version. There's no more versions. We are going to be versionless. This is a really big deal. This is a huge change for us. This is a huge change in how, in our culture at Databricks, and how we operate, how we build, and how we release software. I was telling some folks, we actually had, before the Data and AI Summit, we had like a versionless summit at Databricks. There was like, Ali gave a keynote. This is a really big change for us. It's a big cultural change for us. And what it means is that instead of having that pain of having to go through the version upgrades, we're going to take on that pain for you, and we're going to ensure that things don't break. And there's been a huge amount of work behind the scenes to make sure that that doesn't happen. What else did I not do here? I didn't configure instance types. I didn't pick like what type of nodes I want to use. What were the scaling parameters? So one of the most important things we've done in serverless is we've added a new autoscaler. And so what that means is we can actually use AI to actually just predict how many machines we need. And we can do that both before we ever run your workload, right? Or we can see, oh, this job has run before. We can see how many resources it needs. And then also while it's running, we can scale up and down and really just size the cluster intelligently for the query you're going to run. Another thing that you don't have access to is because there's no cluster, there's no like Spark UI. What we have instead is we have this new query profiler. And if you haven't seen this, it's really great. I encourage folks to try it out. There might be a talk about this in more detail at the summit, but you can actually see how long things take. You can see how much time things take in I/O. And our philosophy here is that the Spark UI is very focused on things like helping you tune clusters, like what's the memory pressure on the driver and things like that. But we're not giving you those controls, and so we don't want you to have to think about doing all that tuning. Instead, we want you to think about the actual queries you're running, the actual data layout. And this is going to help you do that. There's actually, we're not going to go into a ton of detail on this, but you can see there's this like nice graph view, and it's telling you where it spent time, the peak memory usage. So, all right, I'm going to go back. Okay, what else did we not do? I also want to talk a little bit about cost. So in Classic, it's very easy to understand how much you're paying, right? Because you have a cluster, and you're basically paying for that cluster, right? As I said, you're paying Databricks, and you're paying the cloud for that cluster. And how much you pay depends on how many nodes, what type of nodes, how long they're running for. With serverless notebooks and serverless workflows, it works a little bit differently. You're paying us for what you're actually using. You're paying us for the actual work that's being done. And that's a bit of a different model. And so some of the natural questions are like, well, how much? Okay, so what is that? Like, so how much am I going to spend? So we have a little bit of a different approach to this. And what I want to show quickly, I'm going to jump out of the notebook for a second, is you may have seen this. This is like our older usage dashboard. We've built out actually a new usage dashboard, which has way more detail. I think everyone can actually access this today from the screen you can click on, like go to the new dashboard. What this actually does is using our system tables under the hood. It's creating one of our new view dashboards. You can create, like a Genie room to like talk to your data in here, which is really cool. And this has tons of details about all of your usage. You can see by product line, by day here. You can see tags, so you can see how stuff is tagged. You can see things that are not tagged. You have a nice view of like top ends. And of course, this is just a dashboard that we installed on your account. So what that means is, you can go to any of these queries, any of these views, and you can just see the query. You can just change it. You can customize this however you want. One more thing, I know we're going a little bit deep on the cost on the billing side. I want to point out that we also have the ability to add budgets. And budgets are not something that are specific to serverless, but this is in preview now. What you can do is you can just say, hey, I want to spend, I have in this case like $1,000 per month on this tag. And then what will happen is we can actually send you alerts as you approach that. And that's a way to get this really granular control over spend without tying that to the notion of compute. All right, let's come back to the notebook. Here we are. Okay, so what else is here? What else is not here? Okay, so we didn't talk about this in the Classic demo too much, but a really important thing in the world of Classic is this idea of libraries. So much of what you do in Databricks is probably dependent on a library. Maybe it's something that your organization has itself, or maybe it's some third-party library. Well, you can pip install right from the notebook if you want. That works, and of course you can use this. I don't unfortunately have a demo of it right now. I have this on a slide. We have a new feature coming called environments, where we're decoupling the notion of libraries from your compute. It's going to be the environment's going to be a separate object that you can take with you, and you can bring it between notebooks, you can bring it between workflows. It's not tied to your compute configuration. Great. What else can you do or not do? What happens if I try to set a Spark config in serverless compute? Let's see what happens here. Oh, it's got an error. So we are taking away most Spark configs. We're actually not going to let you set them. We're going to throw an error in most cases. And so this is kind of what we mean by serverless being a new product. The goal is not that everything is going to work seamlessly when you use serverless notebooks and serverless workflows. The goal is to make it as simple as possible. So there are going to be some changes. We do have support for a couple of Spark configs. Would love feedback on this, actually, like shuffle partitions, just to show this is one that does work. Cool. So that's all for the serverless demo. Just to come back here, I want to do a quick recap. Let's talk about some of these concepts in Classic and how they work in serverless. So now we're going to kind of go like by these different ideas. So your environment configuration. So before you have to pick a DBR version, you have to configure Spark. We didn't even talk about this. Init scripts, environment variables, installing libraries. In serverless, we have this new idea of environments, which we'll be talking more about in a moment. And it's versionless, so no more versions to pick. Cost and performance. So in Classic, the way you made these trade-offs between cost and performance, right? I want more nodes, I want to go really fast, and I want to pay more money or go slower, is you pick those things yourself. So you pick the instance types, you pick the scaling parameters, maybe spot market parameters. In serverless, we have an autoscaler, new autoscaler, I should say, and we report out to you with system tables. And this is something that we're thinking about in the future, is introducing maybe a cost-optimized versus a performance-optimized mode. So maybe one toggle we do provide is the ability to say, hey, well, I want this to go really fast, whatever it costs, or I prefer to go slower, this can finish whenever, but do it on the cheap. And finally, the Classic cluster really also couples this idea of data access. So, okay, I'm glad this slide is working out. That's awesome. So you have instance profiles. People use init scripts or environment variables to store secrets in many cases. Whereas with serverless compute, we use Unity Catalog. All right, so hopefully at this point in the presentation, about halfway through, I hope folks are feeling excited about serverless. They're like, this is cool, I want this. I want serverless, all those things. I hope that's how you're feeling at this point. Maybe some are thinking, oh man, I really miss tuning Classic clusters. I'm gonna miss like tuning my like driver memory, and that's okay too. What I want to kind of shift from is like, do I want to use serverless, to more practically, can I use serverless? So one thing that's been meeting with a lot of folks this week here at Summit, and one thing that comes up again and again is, serverless is, I hope, the best way to run new PySpark notebooks and workflows. And today we support batch processing. We're not yet ready for streaming. And we're not yet able to support some regulated workloads like HIPAA, PCI, things like that. And we're in a subset of all the regions. So there's some limitations, but really encourage you, if these things are true, to try out serverless today. We'll talk about how to do that. If maybe these things aren't true, or you need some of the features we're going to talk about soon, what I suggest that folks do is you should get on Unity Catalog. So this is not a presentation about UC. I'm sure there's lots of other great presentations about how to get on UC, how to do that. But that's going to make your adoption of serverless way simpler. Start using UC Shared Compute, which uses Spark Connect under the hood. Spark Connect is also the technology we use in serverless. Just really quickly, because I haven't mentioned this elsewhere, Spark Connect just separates out client and server. So it means we can run the actual Python separately from where we run the driver, which is different, and provides security isolation. Finally, I recommend people upgrade to DBR 14.3, our last long-term stable release. This will be your last DBR update. So please come with us one last time, and then from here on out, it's going to be our problem to do this for you. All right, so I keep mentioning serverless is the best way to run new workloads. There's a lot, I keep coming to this iPhone analogy. There's a lot that we're going to have to do to make serverless ready for everything. And that's on our roadmap, and I want to tell you a little bit about what we're going to be working on. So first thing is environments. So I mentioned that we're going to have this very, very basic notion of an environment very soon. What are we working on? So environments are going to let you specify everything. I mentioned Spark Connect, that Python is actually running in a separate VM, a separate node from where your Spark cluster runs. And environments let you basically configure everything about that separate location, that separate REPL, as we call it. So you'll be able to pick things like your Python version, your libraries, environment variables. You'll be able to save it in the workspace, reuse it across notebooks, across workflows. Admins can be able to set defaults for this. And the best thing about this is going to be super fast. So I know with Classic, one of the reasons compute could take a long time to start up was not just starting the cluster, but also building all your libraries. Libraries here it can be pre-built, and you can take those pre-built libraries across notebooks and across workflows. So stay tuned, this is coming really soon. I want to just add one other thing on this. This is really a big part of also, and a question I get all the time about, about DBR and getting rid of versions is, well, how do you not break us? And this is a big part of it. It's because by separating out where we run Python, we're able to really control this and say, hey, like this isn't going to change for you. Your Python version is not going to change. These libraries are not going to change on you until you choose to change them. And your Spark cluster, like the interface to the Spark cluster is very limited. It's basically like the data frame API. Because there's that more limited surface area, it means we can upgrade Spark. We can upgrade the cluster under the hood. All right. Okay, so you've heard me say a couple of times now, use Unity Catalog. That's the best way to use serverless. And it is the best way. But I know that a lot of folks here are in different stages of their adoption journey with Unity Catalog. And so we want to help meet you halfway. And so if you do still need instance profiles to be able to access your data, you will be able to use one instance profile per workspace. It's just going to be the same. If you're using DB SQL today, there's like one instance profile you can set up for DB SQL in the workspace. It's the same one will also allow access to that for serverless jobs and notebooks. Private networking. This is one of the biggest things we hear about. So, if you're using Databricks, you're probably using it to like take data from somewhere and process it and put it somewhere else. And you need access to those locations. And excuse me, in many cases, the way that access is controlled is that it's actually within your private network. And this is one of the great benefits of Classic, by the way, is we're just deploying compute inside your VPC. You may not have to have thought about this before. So there's a couple ways to address this. Right now, what you can do is we actually publish static IP addresses that we use for serverless compute in your Databricks account. And you can just list those IP addresses wherever you need to give Databricks access. So that's something you can do right now. Probably the better option is that very soon in serverless notebooks and serverless workflows, we will support private link. And so if you're not familiar with private link, this is something that's offered by all the clouds. Basically means that we can make the compute in your Databricks account look like it's on the same private network, essentially, as what's in your own VPC in your cloud account. So this means you can access, if there's private repos, libraries you have to install, or just data, sources you need access to, an Oracle database, something like that, you will have access to it with private link. Next, I want to talk about the other side of networking. So before when we were talking about private networking, we were referring to this idea of, okay, I'm running serverless compute and there's stuff I need access to like do my job. But the flip side of that is that we want to make sure that stuff is not leaving the workspace that shouldn't leave. Now, it sounds like the folks in this room, most of you are like Spark, Databricks practitioners. Maybe this isn't something you think about. There might be someone else in your organization who's like an IT or a networking admin, and they've set up like firewall rules and NAT gateways and all this stuff. And those are enforcing all these critical rules like, customer data can't leave my organization. So we want to make sure that your organization is comfortable using serverless. And the way we're going to do that is by supporting egress controls. And there's going to be a couple different modes here. But on one hand, the sort of like networking mindset is you can say, okay, only grant access to these specific IP addresses or domain names. And the other mode is a little bit more data-centric and saying, hey, anything that's in Unity Catalog, just give access to that and nothing else. So that is going to be rolling out later this year. And I know from talking to a lot of folks here, this is going to be a big one that's going to unlock the ability to use serverless in many cases. Okay, last but not least, probably the biggest thing we hear about is chargebacks. So we had one customer in a preview tell me, he's like, look, I love serverless. I want to use serverless for everything, but if I can't attribute cost to different cost centers, I can't use this. And we've heard everyone on this loud and clear. We are going to be working on a way, not just that you can tag your serverless workflows, which works now, but that you can enforce that folks in your organization use tags. So that means when you have those, like that nice cost dashboard that I showed you, you can actually see all of the things you need to see. So if you need your users to say, hey, I need you to fill out this like project tag, you can require that they set that tag. And of course, that budget feature that I showed, works with tags. All the reporting works with tags. So this is how you can do chargebacks. Don't have a mock of this one yet because we're still working on it. Coming soon. Yes, you'll be able to force them by. So the question was, can you force tags by user? And yes, you'll be able to say for this user, yes, these tags always have to apply. Yeah, so and you're asking about the tag values. Yeah, we were just discussing it this morning. So probably the first version will just be like, you can say, hey, this user or this group, make sure these tags are always applied. And over time, we'll add more functionality like, okay, here's the allow list of like, for this key, they have to pick amongst these values or something like that. So still being designed right now. But something we've gotten a ton of feedback on. I would say this is probably, this and the egress controls are probably the number one and number two things we're prioritizing. All right, so again, hopefully at this point, you're excited about serverless, you want to start using it. How do you do that? We are today in public preview on AWS and Azure for workflows and for notebooks. So we have this nifty little previews tab in the UI. So hopefully many of you have seen this and tried it out. Go to our preview portal, you can turn it on. And I'm very excited to announce that we are going to GA serverless jobs and notebooks very soon. In the next few weeks. We're also going to be going into preview soon on GCP. All that roadmap I mentioned, we're going to try to, we're working hard. It's a big group at Databricks working on all this. I hope very soon after launch to be getting the networking controls to enforceable attribution and some of the other things I mentioned will be coming out later this year and into next year. So, our mission, as you heard us say, is to democratize data and AI. We want to make data available for everyone. PySpark is really amazing. Like I said, it's, classic compute is the reason we're all here in a big way, but we think it could be much simpler. We think it can be much faster, much more reliable, much easier to use. And yeah, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for listening and for hopefully trying serverless compute.